Welcome back to another episode of our Drift Car Build-Off presented by Koyo Rad and Spec Clutch.
Today we're going to drop the rear subframe, have a good look for all those cracks that these cars are notorious for, and then weld in a reinforcement kit. At the table today is the future rear end of our E46 M3 drift car. We've got a bunch of PowerFlex bushings that are going to the subframe. We've got our Fortunato rear coilover conversion. We've got wheel spacers. We've got brakes. There's a whole lot. We've got wheel studs. But before we get to all that, we are going to do the rear subframe cracked floor issue repair. So this is the Bimmer World reinforcement kit for that problem. And these are weld-in plates that go in specific places on the underside of the rear floor that we'll show you once we're in there. But these obviously are designed to strengthen up those soft spots or those weak points in the floor that tend to crack. And that cracking apparently happens when the subframe bushings wear out and allow extra movement in that whole area, and that stresses these areas of the floor, which causes the cracking. So we'll go in there, look for any cracks. I'm pretty sure we have it because this car was clunking a lot in the rear end just driving it on the street. We'll weld up and repair any of those cracks, then weld in these plates. And that actually involves cutting the inside of the trunk out as well. These are like patch panels for those areas that we cut out to get to the, there's two layers to it. So we cut out the top layer to get to the secondary layer where there's areas that we need to reinforce as well. And there's even these little shims or spacers that go on top of the rear subframe when we reinstall it. And we also have Bimmer World's rear shock tower reinforcement kit. This can either just sit on top of the existing shock tower to reinforce it, but if you have cracking in that area, they recommend welding these in. So we'll have a look and see if these need to be welded in or if we can just add them on top and sort of sandwich them in to strengthen that area. So that's the approach we're going to take there. I think that pretty much covers it, PT. Maybe it's time to get this car up in the air and start dropping that rear subframe. Frame is down, and my biggest contribution to this job was drinking 2 cans of Coke so we could put the brake lines in there. It wasn't a terrible job since we already had the drive shaft out.
Well, that was pretty quick, right? Like about an hour?
Yeah, I don't think it was even an hour. And really the biggest pain in the whole job was the e-brake or emergency brake
Cable?
brake cables were kind of like binding up coming out of this pocket up here in the chassis. And so when we were lowering it, they were hanging up on those cables. But once we kind of got over the hump with those, she came down nice and easy. All the bolts came out. We didn't really have any like problems with rusty nuts and bolts or anything, which is...
Although this does look pretty rusty.
Oh, it looks, the subframe looks
yeah, the subframe
pretty bad. Like,
definitely rusty.
Cheese flaking off here. But I think we'll give this thing a quick like scrub and pour 15 it, or just give it a paint job. Like
I was gonna say, give it the Mako paint job. Just paint the whole thing. Just bomb it. Everything.
Oh,
who cares?
No.
Yeah.
No, you can't do that. We're gonna change out these big bushings on the subframe. Although, frankly, they're in surprisingly good condition. I thought they'd be way worse than they are. Like, none of them are blown out. And if I put like a pry bar in them, they still seem surprisingly stiff. But we're here now. We might as well do them.
Show them the springs, DP.
Oh, the
Let's talk
springs.
about
Yes.
enthusiastic driving
Yes.
and clunking.
Indeed. Both rear springs were broken. We knew the driver's side one, but it turns out the passenger side one was broken too. And you can see it sheared off, and there's a whole section of the spring missing on both sides. So we're like, man, did somebody like cut the spring on purpose to try to lower it? Or did they just shear off in the same place by coincidence?
Yeah,
I don't know.
There's like one full coil
missing on both sides, which is a little bit strange, but this is probably what we were hearing rattling around in the back end, thinking that it was our subframe, but in fact, I think it was just a spring. So anyway, we got a fix for this with better shocks and springs from Fortunato, but first let's get this all cleaned up. After digging a little deeper, we have cracks in 3 of the 4 main pickup points for the rear subframe. This one being by far the worst. It's got, you know, quite a visible crack, sort of spidery cracks in the whole area here. That'll definitely need to be welded up before we weld in the reinforcement plate. The rest all have much smaller ones, very subtle ones, but both this and this one have them. And then this one on the rear passenger side doesn't appear to have any. So no, you know, welding to repair cracks required there, but we'll still weld in the reinforcement plate to all 4 locations. So I guess first up, Pete will weld up the cracks that we have, then smooth out the area, then strip back all the paint in the area that the plates will need to be welded into, and then weld those plates in, and then we'll paint them, and more things will happen from there.
I'm all ready and prepped up for welding. I've got my Miller-Matic 140 MIG welder. I've made sure to clean all of this up from like the seam sealer or whatever was on here, like a undercoating, and cleaned it with acetone. So we're ready to go. And pro tip, make sure to disconnect your battery if you're welding on the chassis. So without further ado, let's make this happen. Wow, that was a very messy job, but I think I've taken care of all the cleanup and prep work on these. So now it's just a matter of cleaning this all off with some acetone again and getting ready to weld these plates up. We should mention that we're gonna actually drill some holes here to rosette weld these areas. That's why BMW World provides these cutouts here, because you want to go through, there's like 2 layers of metal. So it's like the first layer and then the inner layer, which is what you want to structurally weld to as well. So BMW World has a couple of these plates, I think on a couple of the other ones as well, that we're gonna have to do that. I think these ones here we can stitch weld. The back ones there, we're supposed to go all the way around. So it's gonna be a process here for sure. But we're on the home stretch, so it's time to get to it again. as that just showed, this job is a very labor intensive one. It doesn't necessarily help that I am on a hoist here having to reach up. It was kind of tough to reach some of the angles in terms of welding and cleaning up, but at the same time, I know, I was just thinking, if you're on the ground doing this, it's gonna be much more difficult. So kudos to anybody that does this at home in their driveway. So as you saw, I ended up welding everything up, and I put a bunch of seam sealer around the edges to make sure it's all sealed up. So now the final step up in this area is to prime the areas that were painted, or that I cleaned up and whatnot, and then afterwards give it some spray paint just so it doesn't rust. Not that this car is gonna see any winter anymore, but still you wanna protect the bare metal for sure. So I'm gonna do that right now, and then we can move on to up top, where we have to do a little bit more cutting, grinding, and welding. While we let that paint dry, we are gonna play a game called Just How Rusted Is It? And in today's segment, we're gonna see if we can remove this rusty brake line. We wanna replace these with some stainless steel brake lines from StopTech. Let's see what happens here.
Come on, baby.
And it's stripping. It's done. Well, I think we're just gonna have to cut this guy off and rebuild our line, because that small little hit literally just
Rounded it right off.
Look at it, rounded it right off. Like, it's just so rusty. There's not much rigidity or anything left to it. So let's see if I can somehow get this to move. Oh yeah, there we go. Here it comes. Come on. Come on, girl. Make it out of the hole. Please don't break our bracket here. Oh, so much nastiness. Oh.
There you go. Man, what a mess that thing is.
Rust, people. This is the issue, and it always is the issue. So with that extracted, we've got to do another one of these, and then we can put the brake lines on. But it looks like waiting and doing this job was a good idea, or waiting for the paint to dry was good, because now it's ready to go. So I'm going to put a proper coat of rust enamel on there, and then we can move on. Moving up top here, we actually have to cut parts of the chassis out. I've already outlined where I'm going to remove, and the reason for doing so is underneath here there's an area that you're also going to have to cut another small piece of metal out of, and below there there's 3 spot welds that are insufficient in terms of design from BMW, the original design, and we need to weld that whole area up, which is going to reduce any type of cracking or fatigue. We looked online and saw a lot of people doing these reinforcements and don't actually do this, but I did talk to Bimmerworld, and they said do this job if you want to ensure that you're not going to have cracking. Those plates below aren't sufficient just as themselves. So without further ado, it's time to do some hacking again. I think that is officially a job done. If you saw, it is very, very finicky to get in this area. Sorry for the camera work. We really couldn't get the GoPro really too deep in there. But what I did was connected the 3 spot welds there, so welded that up on both sides. Had to use a small little Dremel tool in many areas. And then I stitch welded the plates back on top and put seam sealer around it. Bimmerworld does give you normal plate, like just a piece of sheet metal that you could have put back on there and welded it up. I chose to just reuse the old one and just stitch weld it around. So all in all, I think this is done. So I think that's a wrap for this video, DP. What do you think?
Yeah, man, let's do it.
That's right. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you got an insight in terms of how much work it is to do this subframe reinforcement. But again, it is very, very worthwhile in my opinion, especially if you're gonna use the car for any type of hard driving. So if you like the video, please give me a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. And if you'd like to join our memberships, hit the join button on the YouTube main page of our channel, or go to Patreon and donate some bucks.
On the shirt.
Down the shirt. That doesn't even happen. I've got this whole thing on here. It still went down there. Well, that means I'm doing up the top button here.